Touch the bottom of your spine right now. Go on, actually do it. Feel that small, hard, triangular bump. That's not just bone, that's a grave. Because right there, buried under your skin, is the exact spot where your body once grew a tail, and then quietly murdered it before you were even born. Every single human being alive today, including you, was built with a real tail. Not a metaphor, not a joke. A real, physical, functioning tail, complete with its own bones and its own muscles growing out of your spine while you were floating inside your mother. And then a few weeks later, before you had fingerprints, before you had a face anyone would recognize, your own DNA reached in and deleted it, cell by cell, on purpose. And here's the part that should actually bother you. It still does this, every single time. Every human who has ever been born has gone through this exact same secret demolition, and almost nobody knows it happened to them. So why would your body waste all that time and energy building something it was only going to destroy weeks later? That question alone should be enough to keep you here, but it gets stranger. Because in 2021, a team of scientists finally found the exact letter of genetic code responsible for erasing tails from an entire branch of the animal kingdom. And what they found wasn't a simple broken gene, it was something closer to a genetic accident. A tiny scrap of DNA that shouldn't have been there, landing in exactly the wrong place at exactly the right time. And somehow, against every reasonable expectation, not killing the creature it happened to. That accident may be the reason you are tailless right now. That accident may be one of the reasons you can stand upright, walk on two legs, and read these words instead of swinging through branches. Stick around, because by the end of this, you're never going to look at your own tailbone the same way again. Let's rewind first, because to understand why your body still remembers how to build a tail, you need to understand what you actually are underneath the clothes and the opinions and the phone in your hand. You are a primate. Not as an insult, as a fact. Every defining feature of your skeleton, your shoulders, your hands, your spine traces back to a family tree that spent the overwhelming majority of its history very proudly wearing a tail. The very first primates, tiny, nervous, tree-dwelling creatures scurrying through branches more than 60 million years ago, absolutely had tails. And they used them constantly for balance, for grip, for communication, for staying alive, one branch at a time. Then, somewhere around 25 million years ago, one branch of that family tree did something almost no other group of mammals in history has ever pulled off. It got rid of the tail completely. Not shortened it like a rabbit, not tucked it away like a bear, removed it permanently down to fused internal bone. That branch is called the apes. Gorillas, chimpanzees, orangutans, gibbons, and you. Every monkey on Earth kept its tail, every single ape lost it. And somewhere in that split, in one ancestor tens of millions of years before humans existed, evolution flipped a switch that has never once flipped back. So what actually happened inside that ancestor's body, and why, all these millions of years later, does your own DNA still remember the blueprint well enough to start building a tail every single time a new human is conceived, only to cancel the order a few weeks later? That's the mystery we're actually here to solve. And the answer starts unexpectedly inside your own mother's womb. At around 4 weeks into development, a human embryo has a visible tail. Not a folded flap of skin, an actual tail with its own vertebrae, sometimes 10 to 12 of them, more bones than exist in the entire lower half of your adult spine, its own blood supply, and its own small muscles attached and ready to move. If you lined up a 4-week-old human embryo next to the 4-week-old embryo of almost any other mammal on the planet, you would struggle to tell them apart. Both have tails, both, honestly, look a little bit like tadpoles wearing a human's future face. Then, right around week 8, something remarkable happens. A process called apoptosis switches on. Apoptosis is programmed cell death, the same biological demolition crew your body uses right now to clear out old skin cells, and the same one used before before birth to carve fingers out of webbed hands. But here, it doesn't just trim the tail down, it dismantles it almost entirely. The tail vertebrae fuse together, shrink, and retreat inward, eventually becoming that small triangular bone you touched at the very start of this video, the coccyx. 4 or 5 fused vertebrae, all that survives of a structure your own body spent real energy building only weeks earlier. And here's the detail that should stop you cold. This isn't a mistake. It isn't a leftover glitch running loose in the system. It's a deliberate, scheduled, precisely repeated genetic program. Every human embryo runs it, every single time, without exception, generation after generation, like clockwork nobody asked for. Which raises the real question underneath all of this. If losing the tail mattered enough that your body still reenacts the entire deletion, on schedule, every single time a human is built, what exactly was so dangerous about keeping it in the first place? Before we answer that, you need to understand what was actually given up, because it's a lot more than people assume. A tail, in most primates, is not decoration. It's a precision instrument. Spider monkeys can hang their entire body weight from a tail wrapped once around a branch, using it like a functioning fifth hand. Some primates have more nerve endings packed into the tip of their tail than you have in your fingertips. It's used for balance during high-speed leaps between branches, for signalling mood to the rest of the group, for stabilizing the entire body during fast, complicated movement through trees, where one wrong step means a long fall. Losing a tail completely isn't like losing an extra toe you never used. It's closer to voluntarily amputating an entire limb's worth of function and betting your species' survival on the outcome. So for one single ancestor, roughly 25 million years ago, to lose that completely, permanently, and pass that loss down to every single descendant that would ever exist, including the one currently watching this with their hands still near their own tailbone, something had to make that trade genuinely worth it. For over a century, scientists knew apes were tailless. What they didn't know was exactly where, inside billions of letters of genetic code, the actual delete instruction was hiding. In 2021, researchers at NYU, led by geneticist Itai Yanai and paleontologist Bart Anjan Bular, decided to go find it directly. They compared the full genomes of tailed monkeys against tailless apes, hunting for one specific mutation that showed up in every single ape and in absolutely no monkey. And what they found was stranger than a simple broken gene. Deep inside a gene called TBXT, a gene responsible for tail development in almost every backboned animal on the planet, from fish to mice to monkeys, they found something that had no business being there. A small, repetitive scrap of DNA called an ALU element, sometimes nicknamed a jumping gene because it can copy and paste itself into random new locations across the genome, almost like a computer virus quietly inserting itself into the wrong file. Most of the time, these jumping genes land somewhere harmless and just sit there. This one didn't. It landed directly inside TBXT, and it broke how the gene was read, cutting the tail building instructions off before they could finish. To actually test this, the researchers engineered mice with that exact same genetic disruption. The mice were born with little to no tail at all. One insertion, one ancient, completely accidental genetic event. Quite possibly the single reason you and every gorilla, chimpanzee and orangutan alive today don't have one. Here's where it gets genuinely strange, because this mutation should have failed. TBXT doesn't just build tails, it also plays a critical role in building the neural tube, the very structure that becomes your spinal cord and brain. In mice, severely breaking this gene usually causes fatal birth defects. A damaged TBXT gene should have been an evolutionary dead end on day one, not the quiet origin story of an entire lineage of upright, tool-using, tailless primates capable of building cities. So why didn't it wipe out the very first ancestor who carried it? The researchers found something almost elegant element hiding in the answer. The allo insertion didn't destroy the gene completely. It caused the gene to be read two different ways at once, sometimes producing a normal protein, sometimes producing a shortened, broken one. That partial, half-finished disruption may have been just imperfect enough to remove the tail, while staying just functional enough to avoid the far more dangerous neural defects a complete break would have caused. In plain terms, one of your ancestors may have survived a genetic accident that should have killed it, purely because that accident happened to land in an oddly forgiving spot in the code. One stroke of pure biological luck, repeated across tens of millions of years and every single generation since, might be one of the reasons you're sitting here right now with the exact skeleton you have. If tails are genuinely useful, and this mutation was genuinely risky, why did it survive instead of quietly dying out with whoever carried it first? Scientists don't have one single, fully confirmed answer, but the leading theory connects directly to the body you're living in right now. Around the same time apes lost their tails, the entire ape lineage was also shifting away from constant four-limbed branch running toward a more upright posture, and eventually, in one branch, full two-legged walking. A tail is essential for balance when you're leaping and sprinting along thin branches on all fours. It becomes a lot less necessary, and possibly even a liability, the moment your spine straightens and your centre of gravity shifts directly over your hips instead of trailing out behind you. Some researchers argue that losing the tail may have quietly removed a physical constraint that later helped make upright walking possible in the first place. Others think it's closer to a side effect, a natural consequence of ape ancestors growing larger and heavier than their monkey cousins, which made tree-swinging tail balance far less useful and steady, ground-supported movement far more valuable. Either way, the tailless body plan didn't just survive that ancient gamble. It became the entire foundation for gorillas knuckle walking through forests, orangutans carefully climbing branch to branch, and eventually, in one very specific lineage, a fully upright human stride capable of walking for miles across open, exposed ground with nothing but 2 feet and a lot of stubbornness. And here's the detail that turns this whole story from ancient history into something quietly alive inside your own body right now. Every so often, a human is born with what doctors clinically call a vestigial tail, a small, soft, fleshy protrusion at the base of the spine, occasionally several centimetres long. It happens in an extremely small number of births worldwide. In almost every documented case, it contains no bone at all, just skin, fat, blood vessels, and sometimes a little muscle, and it can be quietly and safely removed with no lasting effect on the person at all. This isn't evolution suddenly reversing itself or some ancient gene waking back up. It's something closer to a small glitch in the deletion program you inherited. The genetic instructions for building a tail are still sitting inside every single human genome alive today, dormant, mostly silenced, but never actually deleted from the source code itself. In these rare cases, the shutdown signal simply arrives a little late or a little incomplete, and a small piece of the original structure survives the process that erases it in almost everyone else on Earth. The blueprint never actually left. It's still inside you, right now, filed away and switched off, running on a 4-week schedule that has been repeating quietly, without applause, since long before anyone was around to write any of this down. So the next time you sit down and feel that small, hard bump at the base of your spine, you're not touching a leftover scrap of bone. You're touching the scar tissue of a decision made 25 million years ago, and a decision your own body is still quietly making right now every single time a new human being is built from scratch. You didn't end up tailless by accident, and you didn't end up tailless because evolution slowly decided you didn't need one anymore. You ended up this way because one single time, deep in your evolutionary past, a fragment of stray, copy-pasted DNA landed in exactly the right, exactly wrong, exactly dangerous spot. And Against every reasonable expectation, your ancestor survived it anyway. That mistake was never corrected. It was repeated on purpose. Every single generation since, all the way down to the 4 weeks you spent quietly growing and then losing a tail nobody ever told you about. You are not simply a creature without a tail. You are the living result of one extremely specific act of prehistoric genetic demolition, still running perfectly, right on schedule, inside every human being who has ever drawn a breath. Including the one reading this sentence right now, with their hand still resting on their own spine. If knowing that changes even slightly how you think about your own body, imagine what else in you is still running on instructions this old. Subscribe, because that bump at the bottom of your spine is just one clue, and there are dozens more like it hiding in your body right now, quietly waiting for someone to finally ask why.